Hey guys, Dr. Morse, injury Expertz. So unfortunately, the fear has been confirmed. Malik Nabers tore his ACL. Now it happened on this play right here. You can see it. He was going up for a jump and he likely tore it when he was transitioning from the field to the air, stopping and starting. Now I have some concerns. This has to do with the quality of the field at MetLife Stadium. And there have been multiple ACL tears there, including Odell Beckham back in the day. Now, people sometimes ask me, well, what is the difference between grass and turf? And it's a good question. Grass obviously is softer, but it has a energy translation difference. And as good as they have become at making the turf, it is still not like grass. They want to make it pretty. They want to make it resilient. They want to make it so that they don't have to do anything to it. The problem is the translation of energy is completely different in grass than it is in turf. What does that mean? When you're wearing cleats and you run and you cut on grass, that energy that comes out of your body is going to cut the grass, therefore dissipating that energy. Well, when you do the same thing on turf, especially repetitively, what happens is that energy can't cut through the turf because the turf is made out of these little micro pieces of rubber. And essentially what happens is that energy then translates back to the tissue, back to the body. And if the weakest point is his ACL or an Achilles or a calf or an ankle or whatever, that's where the energy is going to go. And now if you do that multiple times over every route, over every play, then these little micro tears eventually lead to a full thickness tear. That's why 75% of ACL tears are non-contact. And that's a big deal because this is a very frustrating and long, arduous journey to come back. Now, the important thing to understand is that there's a difference between ACL tears in elite wide receivers and in regular, what I call replaceable or journeyman wide receivers. Now, there is a correlation with recovery time and effectiveness in return to play with actually draft capital. Now, this chart right here, we just released a little bit ago here from the Injury Expertz, in that were 9 wide receivers that have torn their ACL that can be considered elite over the past 10 years. Odell Beckham was the only one that tore his twice. Now, out of those 9, 8 have returned to play so far. Brandon Ayuk is not quite back yet. Now, out of those 8, Odell Beckham is the anomaly here. He ended up struggling both times. One time he suffered an injury and he missed a couple games early in the season, and then he ended up re-tearing it that same year and missing the following season. So that's why his stats are a little bit off. Now, Mike Williams really never was able to recover. So one could argue, was he truly elite based on his draft capital? Yes, he was. But there were 3 players that were super elite. Jordy Nelson finished as the wide receiver 1 his first year back. We also had Keenan Allen as wide receiver 2 and Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 3 in their respective years. So elite talent is able to push through. Now, there's one caveat to this, is if you suffer a new injury. That's what happened to Chris Godwin. He suffered a hamstring strain in his first game back, missed 2 games, and that was absolutely peppered with targets by Tom Brady in his, I think, last season, and ended up finishing as the wide receiver 19 that year. So it is very possible Malik Nabers comes back and absolutely smashes in 2026 based on the fact that he has the draft and the pedigree, and he basically has almost a full season to recover. Now, we don't know specifics. Is this an isolated ACL? Did he also partially or fully tear the MCL? Did he also injure the meniscus, which is very common? So we don't know those questions, but as of right now, he is still a top 2 to 3 round pick next year. Now, most guys take about a month to ramp up. We see this with Stephon Diggs right now. And some guys suffer setbacks or their knee is much more complicated, or they suffer it later in the year, a la Brandon Ayuk, and they're not ready to return. Sometimes they take till week 8, 9, something like that. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but there's a little bit of a silver lining for Brandon Ayuk, not so much for Malik Nabers, in that he could potentially return to elite form in 2026, presumably with Jackson Dart as the starting quarterback. Unfortunate news, unfortunate injury for one of the game's best, but that's what we have to look forward to as he continues to transition from an ACL reconstruction to the offseason. His 2025 season is unfortunately over.